Live, one viewer, so congratulations to the one viewer that's here. I hope the sound's working. If you can comment to let me know if the microphone's working. I think it is. Just take a few seconds, check it's all going well. Right, welcome, one viewer. I'm sure a lot of you will see this later on YouTube. A quick 1 hour question time about the YT Capra. So the reason I'm doing this is I had a crash last week and hurt my shoulder and arm, and it's really, I'm not injured. Possibly cracked a rib, but it's really awkward to edit video on the computer for more than a few minutes at a time. Or my elbow and ribs and back are pretty sore. So I thought I'd do an Ask Me Anything live to answer some questions, give you guys some more content about the bike. I really hope I don't start sneezing because then I'm in a really bad situation. But you can watch the unboxing and first look videos. They're already on my YouTube channel. And the full written review about the bike is on my website in the reviews, opinion and advice section. I'm not sure if I'm going to get around to finishing the next part of the review video. As I said, I'm injured, can't edit very well. But it's all there in writing and I'll try and get it finished off before the competition finishes, but no guarantees. But the overview of the bike was really good, fantastic consumer product, turned up on time, really well packaged, really well put together. On the trail, pretty quiet or very quiet, feels really solid. Yeah, pretty good bike overall. No real complaints except I couldn't tune the flight attendant to my preferences and a few other little minor issues, but overall, fantastic bike really. No major problems. So first question, Cathal McGowan on email asked, I'm a very similar height at 184 centimeters. I'm wondering if you found any issues with maneuverability regarding the seat tube length and the 170mm dropper. No problems at all. I'm 185 centimeters. I measured the saddle, it's exactly 79 centimeters from the center of the BB to the top center of the saddle, like above the seat post. That's where I always measure. Normally 79.5 is my perfect height. And here we've got 40mm left to play with. A little bit less because of this rubber seal. There's this rubber seal on there to stop stuff going down the seat tube. But if you remove that rubber seal, you've got about 40mm to play with. So I could easily get a 180, 190mm reverb style post on there. The reverb does have a really deep stack. I think on a lower stack, this part of the seat tube, seat post collar, and the seal, like a 1-up post or a bike yoke, a much lower stack. So I think I could squeeze a 200mm dropper in there. Not 100%, but yeah, no problems there with the seat tube length. So yeah, thanks to Cathal for that email. Next one, bit of a joker. Steve from Bike Alp. If you've ever been on holiday with Bike Alp in San Juan or now Serre Chevalier, you'll know he's a bit of a funny guy. Hi, I have a question about the Capra. Why did they name it after the Italian translation of the goat? Why didn't they use the German word for goat Ziga. Is it because Ziga also translates as bitch or nanny in English, and they thought it wouldn't be an appropriate name for the bike? I would love to see a YT bitch on sale in the future, especially in the UK market, who generally doesn't speak Italian. I actually think it was named after the Greek or Israeli translation of goat. So I remember they launched this in Israel, and there's some connection there. I think quite a few of the YT bikes have a connection. I know the Decoy is named after a bottle of wine in California. YT Decoy, the e-bike version. So I don't know why they didn't call it the Ziga, but it's a goat, yeah. Greek or Israeli version of the goat. Typical kind of question from Steve. John next on email. Can I enter from the USA to win the bike? Well, great opportunity for me to get a sales pitch in here. Yeah, all my competitions, you can enter anywhere worldwide, and global shipping is included. All the competitions say where the product is going to ship from, and you need to bear in mind if you're in the USA and it's shipping from the UK, you might have to pay some import duty tax, and that's your responsibility, not mine. So yeah, some of the products, this is going to ship from Italy or the UK. Some of the products ship direct from the UK. Some of the products, like a Bell Full 9 helmet I did last month, and I have one on this month, we'll just find that anywhere in the world, the easiest place to order from you. So if you're in the USA and you're in the Bell helmet, we'll order from a shop in the US. If it's a guy in Germany, like last time, we'll order it in Germany. Obviously this, I can't order a new one from anywhere, so this will ship from Germany, or I'll drive it back to the UK. And yeah, so you can enter from anywhere, all over the world. The first 390 tickets sold at half price for £10. And I think I've only sold 10 more since then at 20 at the full price. So really low odds, £20 a ticket, but €9,000 bike. Yeah, hell of a prize to win. I've got a few questions here, I'll just check. Okay, I'll try and answer that later. Next question, Tom Coles on Instagram. Carbon hype, ? Do you see any benefit? Well, this is a deep subject. In terms of, well, let's start from the basics. In terms of owning the bike and using the bike, carbon fibre is pretty good. Material to use, it's really smooth. They've designed this really nicely, really smooth. There's nowhere really for the mud and grime to sort of stick or get stuck in corners. So yeah, quite smooth in that way. Carbon use, and obviously nice shape, nice aesthetics. The carbon makes it very easy to build shapes that the designers want to make it look nice. And yeah, makes it easy to clean, all that stuff that I just said. They can also choose the flex characteristics more in a more detailed way than a steel or aluminium tubed frame. The main reason I think in the past that we've used carbon was because it was lightweight. This bike's really heavy. I think it was 15.8 kilos with EXO tyres on, so really heavy. That's partly because all this electric stuff is pretty heavy, and yeah, it's a heavy duty bike, big, massive cassette on the back, 12-speed Eagle, that's really heavy. The Access derailleur is, I'm not sure how much, but definitely heavier than a normal SRAM derailleur. The same with the Reverb, even though you've got extra batteries here. All heavier products, but still, it's a pretty heavy carbon bike. So carbon was used to make more lightweight bikes, but then, and wheels and other parts, but carbon's quite prone to cracking if it gets loaded too much. So then the manufacturers end up putting more and more carbon on to try and stop it cracking to make it stronger, but then you end up with a heavy bike. So carbon hype, do I see any benefit? Overall, not really. Currently, I'm a big fan of steel. I'm not sure if you can see this bike. Steel is my favourite material at the moment. I'm really being swayed towards steel at the moment. It's cheap, cheapest option. Obviously the front of this bike's titanium, but the rear steel and the other bike is steel. Oh my God. So steel, really cheap, really easy to work with, easy to see the damage, easy to repair. You can weld it yourself, doesn't need heat treating, but it's heavy. Aluminium, much stiffer, but also more brittle. Again, easy to work with. Carbon can be tuned into lots of different ways, but nowadays carbon's not really light. It's definitely not cheap. I think one of the main reasons it's used is ease of manufacturing, because if you want to mass produce bikes, welding a bike's pretty hard. You need highly skilled people to do the welding, where a carbon bike, you just need a carbon mold, and people, children, possibly slaves, probably shouldn't use that word, in Asia, Indonesia, Cambodia. I think these are made in Cambodia. I'm not sure about that. They just need people to put the carbon, what do you call them? The carbon pieces. There could be thousands of pieces of carbon in this bike, all different shapes, like pieces of paper, and the carbon just needs to be put in, covered with resin, and then the bladder, the mold. So it's more labour intensive than making a steel or aluminium bike, but less skilled work. It's just labour, just putting the pieces in the right place. So I think that's one reason we see a lot of carbon hype. It's a better material for big brands to manufacture, I believe. I'm happy to be told otherwise. Like all my videos, all my reviews, I'm not an expert engineer. I'm just a bike rider. I'm not an expert mechanic. I'm not a suspension expert. I think I'm an expert in riding bikes and analysing what works well, what doesn't, how they perform on the trail, how it affects your riding style, your confidence, all these things. I'm not a carbon fibre or developer or CEO of a bike company, but I'm pretty sure the main reason carbon is used nowadays is for, easy mass production. So that's the answer to that one. Carbon hype, do you see any benefit? Overall, not really. This bike did feel pretty, I'm not sure what word to use, like firm, tight, solid, not harsh, not stiff, which can be a problem with some carbon bikes. I think generally the problem with carbon is the bikes are too light and they are stiff to a point, but if you're riding them gently, they're okay. But if you really start to push them through rough sections or into corners, you go past the point of the stiffness that the bike can handle, and then it will flex and then spring back. So you can get a springy feeling on some carbon frames. Did not notice it with this bike. But also, due to the suspension setup, I wasn't really pushing myself at all on this bike. So next question, Simon Adams on Instagram. Which Capra spec is the one you would buy? Personally, I would go for a cheaper spec and upgrade the suspension and brakes. Yeah, I agree. And just before this, I checked the YT site. There's actually hardly any Capras left for sale. I think there's 3 models left, and one's got Fox Kashima suspension on, which could be an option with some tuning. And The other two were super base models, and there's hardly any left. So first, yes, I agree, Simon, I would buy a cheaper spec and upgrade the suspension and the brakes. I did actually put some Uberbike Race Matrix white pads in these codes, which did improve the bike a lot. I'm impressed by those. Uberbike, I think there were 4 pairs for £16 in the UK, or £24. Check them out. Uberbike seemed good. Definitely improve the bite of these brakes. Ideally, we just bang some Hopes on. The Hopes are fantastic, or hopefully SRAM are just going to come out with a new code soon, because I think this brake's really sort of putting SRAM behind in the braking game. They need to up the game. There was a new code seen last year on the World Cup circuit. Hopefully that's going to come out soon and give a better brake option from SRAM. A lot of people agreeing with me about that recently. Loads of messages. They're not that bad, but they're just not good enough. And other brakes seem to be pushing forward, improving, getting more powerful, getting better, getting more reliable. The codes just average. So yeah, I would buy a cheaper one, and I would definitely get the suspension tuned. I think this now applies to all bikes. The most important thing on any bike in the ride and your confidence is to get the suspension tuned and working for you. Doesn't matter what suspension you have. If you've got a new Push 11.6 shock and an Intend fork, which is something I say all the time in Finale, loads of people with lots of money, really expensive bikes, the best, most expensive suspension you can buy. And you even just see them riding down the street, and you can see the bike's not in balance, fork's too soft or the rear's too soft. And you see them on the trail and their suspension's just not doing what it should. So yeah, get a different version, get the suspension tuned. Yeah, I definitely agree with you there, Simon. But the other thing to say, there's only a few of these models left. This model's 2 years old now. They've got a new race team launching, Enduro race team launching this year with Jack Moyer, Texi and Jasper Woolley from the US. I think there's going to be a new one coming out anytime soon, very soon. Possibly being held back. I know there's some bikes being held back from launch at the moment due to overstock of old models, and some brands, I won't name them, some brands don't want to let the bike companies launch some new bike models with new product spec on them due to overstock and trying to clear out the old products. So I've got a feeling, I have no idea about this, but I've been in the bike industry a long time, 5 years at Pink Bike. You start to see the product cycles and how they work. There's hardly any left on the website at all for sale. 3 left, I think. Very high chance there's a new one coming out soon. So yeah, wait and see. There might be some better, newer options coming soon. Although that contradicts my number one piece of advice. Don't buy something that's just been launched. So this one's been out for a few years now. Didn't have any problems. I guess if there were any teething problems, they've been fixed. But yeah, there could be a new Kappa coming out, would be my guess. Jonathan on Instagram. This is Jonathan from Germany, now Mexico. Really nice guy, messages me all the time. I'm sure you're watching this now. 5 kids, that guy. Very productive man. I'm excited to buy a ticket for a complete bike. I like it when you have complete bikes to raffle off, because the poor guy had to sell his bike when he moved from near here in Italy to Mexico. So he's desperate to win a bike. Do you have any other bikes coming up? Wasn't a privateer something that was requested? And his second question, can the electronic parts of the suspension be removed and run manually? So first one, a lot of people did ask me to test the Privateer, and I did want to get one. I didn't want to ship one from the UK to Europe, to Italy especially, because I always have massive issues with customs. But Privateer is still on the list. I'm really struggling to find some bikes that I want to buy to test because these guys are so good. Every bike I look at, I just don't get particularly excited by it. But the Privateer is on the list, so next time I go back to the UK, I'm going to try and pick up a Privateer. Only heard a lot of good things about those. And his second question was, can the electronic parts of the suspension be removed and run manually? No, you can't remove the flight attendant modules from the suspension, I believe. Oh my God. I can't have a coughing fit, then I'll be in agony. Sorry. You can't remove the modules because they're like integrated into the dampers. You can use it manually, not using the app. You can use the main module on the top of the fork to adjust the damping front and rear for each unit, and to adjust the bias of the flight attendant. So it's semi-manual, but it still needs the electronic input to make adjustments. But I think I'm not 100%, if you take the batteries off, the damping and settings will stay the same as before. You won't have the flight attendant and you won't be able to adjust anything, obviously. Chris on Instagram, can I mount stabilizers and lasers on this bad boy? Well, Chris is an English guy who managed to set up a business in Italy with the Finale Ligure workspace. So if you've got the skills to set up a business in Italy as an English guy, you probably can mount stabilizers and lasers onto it because you're a highly skilled, productive individual. And if you're on Finale, you need someone to work, check it out, FL Workspace, good friends. If you need to work online, you can go there. They've got printers, quiet room, Wi-Fi, all that stuff. Normally biscuits as well. Next question, Taylor Gregory, Instagram. Does the flight attendant actually work better than a mid-range, properly tuned, traditional setup? There's 4 questions here. So the first one, does it work better than a mid-range, properly tuned, traditional suspension setup? No, basically, no. And I think you could argue, anyway, this is mid-range suspension units, RockShox, Zeb, Ultimate, and Ultimate front and rear, Super Deluxe Ultimate. I'm going to say that's mid-range. The shocks aren't that expensive, or the fork. Obviously there's a lower range, the select versions of the RockShox suspension. That is low range. I'd say this is medium range. The stuff on this bike is high range, top range, custom tuned Dorado, Cane Creek shock, and things like EXT, push. That's high-end stuff. But basically, no, didn't work that well. For me, the tuning was an issue. You would be better off, well, you'd be better off with the same suspension, with a good tune, and without the flight attendant. Much better off in every way, really. The flight attendant is essentially just a lockout or a pedal platform and a bit of other, automatic electronic adjustments instead of turning the clickers manually. So no, a well set up version. I'd be much better off, I'd be 10 times better off buying a standard Zeb and Super Deluxe shock from NSR Racing in Tasmania or MST in Germany or JTEC in the UK or probably TF Tuned in the UK. Haven't used them for a while, but you'd definitely be better off buying stock units without the electric and getting a really good tune to suit you and your riding style. Were you able to sort out the front big hit required to open the rear suspension? Don't understand that, sorry. Did you find any custom tuning options? No, I emailed loads of people, loads and loads of centres, and couldn't find anyone in Central Europe, EU, that wanted to tune it. Because it's such a new product, none of the centres that I spoke to had experience with it and learned how to tune it. They weren't 100% sure how it differed from a Charger 3 or a Charger 2.1 damper, if it's different or not. So I got no guarantees from anyone. A couple of guys in the UK said they could look at it, and guys in the US, but shipping out of EU, shipping back, customs, stuff getting lost in the post. It's crazy. RockShox is the biggest, I believe, the biggest suspension brand in mountain biking. You should be able to get it tuned anywhere locally. There's suspension tuners all over. I couldn't find one. I'm sure they're out there. I couldn't find one. There were a lot of the centres did reply saying if it's definitely a standard Charger 2.1, they can tune it, and the same with the shock. But no one was sure because it's like some kind of hybrid modified version of a Charger 2.1. And his last question, stoked for the video, not a question, but an exclamation. And to follow on from that, the flight attendant is essentially a lockout and a pedal platform. This bike pedals really well as it is, really good anti-squat figures. And it's set up well for pedaling, it's designed well for pedaling. I don't think you need this kind of lockout on it at all. It did feel nice riding around town, really responsive, firm. You got full lockout and you're like on the road, hopping up onto curbs, bombing around town, but overall, you'd be absolutely fine just with the shock fully open pedaling. Even when it's even in open mode, it pedaled fine. So yeah, I don't think it's really necessary. It would work if you had a bike that pedaled really badly. I'm thinking like a high pivot downhill bike that pedals really badly. It would make it pedal really well because the pedal platform and the lockout modes really do firm up the suspension, and it is really quick. It does work really well. Locks and unlocks all the time when you're pedaling, feels the ground. But on this bike, it's just not really necessary, I don't think. It would be good for XC racing, and it would be good for, yeah, big tank of a bike that pedals terribly to give it better descending bump advantage, and then use the lockout, the electronics to firm it up. Next one. Sam, how is the linkage on the bike? Does it feel very connected to the ground or very plush and maybe harder to pump into the ground? Does it feel connected like a non-high pivot bike should? Is it good through rock, or does it feel good through rock gardens and not connected to the ground? Finally, would you use an O-chain on it? Okay, that's a bit of a complicated question, but how does the linkage feel? Well, it feels pretty progressive. These are quite progressive bikes. The old Capra was extremely progressive. I'm not sure off the top of my head what this is, but a pretty progressive bike. I think 30% overall progression, maybe 25. They've lowered it. I'll take a guess on the next version, they'll lower it further. But yeah, linkage and the overall suspension setup on the pedals, really good, firm. pumping, really reactive pumping. Felt nice, generated speed well. Didn't feel stuck to the ground at all. The rear shock with the settings just wouldn't, partly because it's air, so it doesn't sit into the travel as nicely as a coil shock. And you've got like a slightly forward axle path. Not really, like compared to this thing feels stuck to the ground all the time in the steel version. This, not really. But yeah, for pumping, driving the bike, yeah, it felt good. But it's definitely not, with this setup, definitely not sticking to the ground. The wheel was in contact with the ground a lot less than on my other bikes. But that's a whole combination of the bike design and the suspension setup. Would I use an O-chain on it? Yeah, the O-chain would definitely be an advantage on this bike. I think it's got 25 degrees of pedal kickback. So at low speeds, O-chain would definitely help this bike. That would be a really big help for descending. Yeah, it would smooth it out. The O-chain is going to help with relieving that chain tension between the chainring and the cassette, which helps the bike sit into the travel more easily. It also helps under braking because you haven't got that tension. You get less effect from the anti-rise when you're braking. So yeah, O-chain would definitely smooth it out, would definitely help it stick to the ground more. That would be the first thing I would do to this bike if I was going to do any more tuning on it. But yeah, it's not really a ground sticker, ground hugger, more responsive, less sticking to the ground, less connected to the ground. Next question. Liam Reed, is there a noticeable difference between frame material? You've ridden aluminium and steel with success, so I'll be interested to know your thoughts and opinions. Well, this is a complicated question because you could have 20 different carbon frames that all feel completely different. The same with steel and the same with aluminium. But overall, carbon, this is a massive generalization, so no complaints please. Carbon generally feels better damped, smoother, quieter than aluminium. Yeah, sort of a little bit, softer, more damped, but also firm. You can also have carbon bikes that are really springy. They're really stiff, but they don't have enough compliance, so they're stiff. I mentioned this earlier. They load up and then they bend and then spring back. That's not a nice feeling. That's a feeling you'll get on super lightweight XC bikes. There's a lot of carbon material in this bike. It's the version versus the carbon. And I haven't done specific testing. I've got, I know, two good testers that I respect a lot. I won't name them. One guy won 12 Masters World Champs or something in mega avalanches. Another guy works for a magazine in the UK. And over the past 6-7 years, they did do tests with different brands, alloy version versus the carbon version, and they all say exactly the same as what I just said. Lower speeds, not pushing it, the carbon feels better. When you're really pushing into hard, rough stuff and flexing the bike, then the aluminium generally feels smoother, more confidence inspiring. Yeah, less springy, more direct when you're going through rock gardens and really rough stuff. Massive generalization. This guy says you've also ridden aluminium and steel. Generalizing, steel, I'm really falling in love with steel bikes. The Spur last year, this bike, and the other one of these. Yeah, the steel, thin tubes, really quiet, no echo, which you can get on big aluminium tube bikes. Yeah, easy to work with, really well damped, really nice feeling on the trail. If you want to race it around the trail centre, you probably want something really stiff and responsive. But for riding rough, natural stuff, steel, better damping, better grip, better compliance, better predictability. Steel's my favourite. Aluminium, aluminium. Again, lots of different feelings, but generally pretty stiff feeling. Current opinion, steel's the best. And yeah, the weight's not really a problem or a disadvantage anymore. Modern steel tubes, pretty light, and carbon frames are getting heavier and heavier. The same with alloy. That's all the questions on here. I don't think I've spent that much time. The one thing I was going to predict is, to finish with, my predictions for the next model. Like I said, I'm pretty sure there's going to be a new model. Just guessing, the new model is going to come out soon. Predictions: taller setup for the taller sizes. Steerer tubes cut too low on this bike, I think, and the bar's too low. Hopefully we'll see a taller front end. I think this is a 64-degree head angle on paper. They'll definitely knock a degree out the head angle. It's, I would guess, 62.5 to 63 adjustable. I think they'll also add another degree to the seat angle to make it up to 80, I think, 79, 80. So I won't have to slam the saddle forward for the taller riders. I think they'll also go up to a 180 or 190 mil travel front, and maybe a little bit more on the back as well. I think that's it really. It's a pretty sort of well-rounded bike, but yeah, they'll definitely go a bit slacker, a bit steeper seat angle, a bit higher at the front, a bit more travel, and I guess they'll also do longer or more chainstay options. I think they'll do a longer chainstay version, hopefully. But yeah, just playing guessing games about the new model completely. Wow, lots of questions now. Can you mount a 220mm disc at the rear without checking the owner's manual? I'm not sure, but you could if you wanted to at your own risk. Put on a plus 40mm brake adapter and get a 220. Hopefully, also predicting the next model, hopefully they'll put a 200mm direct mount on, because I mentioned this in the unboxing video. It's got a PM180 mount, and every bike in their range comes with a 200mm rotor. So every bike they build, they have to put a stupid adapter on, which adapters are stupid. Just put the right size brake mount on. Adapters are stupid. More bolts, more things to fall, drop on the floor when you're working. You've never got the right one that you need when you change them. It can affect your brake alignment or lead to vibration, different things. Hopefully the next one will have a 200. But check your owner's manual before you upgrade to a 220mm rotor. Thomas Vanosmail: any reason why you wanted to test this version of the Capra? And if you only had to change one thing, what would you change? The reason I bought this one was it had the biggest discount on Black Friday and seemed like the best one to test. I did want to test this new flight attendant stuff and see if there was, if it was going to live up to the hype. It's a really, really expensive high-tech product. To me, didn't really live up to the hype. And it got the biggest discount, so obviously it saved the most, and I am trying to run a business here. I thought this one's going to give me the best opportunity to get some money back. I basically always lose money on the full bikes. I'm definitely losing a few thousand at the moment on this as it stands. Hopefully we'll sell a few more tickets. I'm a couple, 2, 3, depends how you calculate it. You could say 4 grand down. So it's a 9 grand bike reduced to 5, 8. So that was the main reason I bought it, was the discount. And if I could only change one thing, it would definitely be the suspension tune, but we can't change that. So changing all the suspension is ridiculous, really, on such an expensive bike. Yeah, the main thing I changed, I put an O-chain on there, and if I can have a second thing to change, a taller bar, just needs a tall handlebar, or just a taller steerer tube. If they left the steerer tube 20mm longer, would be fine. But overall, the bike as a package, just the suspension tune, it does work really well. It's just not quite, and you might think I'm being too negative or going on too much about the suspension tune. Yeah, you can ride it, it's pretty good, but it's not as good as it can be. It's a £9 bike, which we want to get the best performance out of these bikes that we can, and for you guys out there, we're trying to get the best ultimate performance. When I ride this thing, every time I ride it, I'm absolutely full of confidence. I just went into a section last week, twice as fast as I've been any time before on my second run on it. Second run was one of the best runs of my life, which you never get on a new bike. Nailed the section twice as quick as normal, and then the next corner was way too tight and I just exploded. This bike, it just killed my confidence, just wasn't really, yeah, I could ride it quite fast. I could jump on it, I could get most of the lines that I wanted, but it's just not really giving you the support and the confidence and the feeling to be like, yeah, now I feel good, now I want to go. Always like, feel like you're being held back by a bad tune, basically. There's nothing really wrong with the suspension itself, it's just needs a few more shims or different shims. Warb, can you explain the fork stiffness? I don't know which aspect of the fork stiffness you want to know, but my problem with these super long travel, this is only 170, but it goes to 190. Normal way up forks compared to a USD fork. Loads of stiffness here, big tube, massive tubes, huge tubes to try and stop bush and bind and flex like this. Massive crown to stop flex and to stop creaking. Massive surface area. Torque caps to increase stiffness at the wheel. But I'm not sure if I can do this. All stiff, low down. Steerer tube, really thin. Intend forks now have a much thicker steerer tube. But I don't know if I've got the force to do it, and the floor's too slippy. I don't know if you can see all the flex here and the bar flexing. You've got a really stiff fork down here where you want it to be more compliant to track the ground and grip. Here, really flexy, whereas this central area of the bike, you want the most stiffness, not of the grips, but the head tube between your feet and the head tube, you want the most stiffness for an accurate, predictable bike. Here, you've just got a really flexy steerer, and that's with possibly a broken rib and a bad shoulder and elbow. I can feel it. Yeah, there's some tyre flex, but you can feel the steerer tube bending. But yeah, that's not great flex, I don't believe. I'm sure RockShox have got, data on where the fork should flex and stuff. But really, I think these long travel, super big tubed modern forks, I think this is 39mm, Fox 38, Öhlins 38. Don't think you need them. It's just like, what do you call it? Like a ball swinging competition so you can make the new biggest single crown fork. And it's just fashion that it has to be a single crown. This bike would be much better with my Boxer on it. The Boxer on my other bike. More stiffness here, direct mount stem onto the crown, much better stiffness. When you stand up on this pedaling, you can feel it flexing. You stand up on the downhill bike with a downhill fork, or literally the complete opposite, upside down fork. No flex here. This is fucking solid. I just can't flex it because of my shoulder, but yeah, this fork, the classic test. Flexy at the bottom, more flex here, more compliance, more grip. Up here, this section, these upside down tubes, massive stiffness where you want it. Flexy at the bottom so the wheel can track, stiff at the top for predictability and yeah, predictability, confidence, good feeling on the bike. Yeah, big, long travel, massive forks. I don't know, I'll just put a lyric on it. Jonathan Angieri, on my last bike, Jeffsy, I noticed around the BB seat tube junction the paint was starting to crack. I reached out to YT and they said this is common due to flex. Did you notice this on the Capra? Well, I haven't seen any cracks yet. I didn't ride it very hard. I haven't noticed any cracks. I didn't ride it very hard. Paint cracking due to flex. Yeah, that can happen. But I can't really see on this bike any like key points where that might happen. Some bikes it's obvious where you might have some flex, but this huge front triangle, I can't imagine there's much flex going there at all. And then the rear is made up of multiple shorter pieces, yeah, connected by pivots and bearings. So no, I don't think so. That's another problem with carbon fibre that I should have mentioned before talking about materials. If you've got a steel bike and it's cracked, you can see it's cracked. And if you're inspecting your bike enough, you'll find it before you have a major problem. The same with aluminium. With carbon, this front end has got multiple layers of carbon fibre on top of one another. I don't know how many layers, there could be 4, I don't know, I'm guessing here, 2, 3, 10 layers in some places. You could have a frame where all the layers are cracked except the outside one, and you never know, you can't see. And this is a problem with like crash damage, like maybe people hitting trees head on really hard, or the bike flips down a hill. It can be hard to see and find the damage on carbon fibre. But yeah, paint cracking due to carbon flex, not sure about that. Doesn't sound good. John, Paul, are there any tuners out there doing custom work on the new RS stuff? No, RockShox, I didn't say this, I'm reading a comment. I hear nothing but bad things about the direction RockShox went on this latest generation. So I think by the latest generation you mean 2023 Charger 3 damper kind of stuff. I'm not sure what the equivalent rear shock is. So this is a 2023 model, MY 2023 flight attendant. It actually uses a 2.1 damper, and I think the damper in the Super Deluxe is also the slightly 1 year model before, whereas now it's changed to Charger 3 and whatever on the rear. I don't know. I know that NSR, Nigel's been doing some stuff. I haven't used it yet. I'm waiting for the new Boxer to come out because I would like to get a tuned Boxer from him, but not available yet. I think JTech in the UK is doing some stuff, but I don't really have much info. Again, avoid buying the latest model stuff I'm sure in 1 year there'll be great suspension tuning options for these units, and then I'll be able to send it to nearly any tuner and get a quick, easy fix that will make it a fantastic bike. But yeah, if you're buying the newest stuff, first of all, it's probably not going to be that good as standard. I don't know why. It should be better as stock. And yeah, you can have teething problems. New bikes, teething problems. New suspension, teething problems. You want to let the models be out for a few years. Good product to bring in again on this bike. Cane Creek Kitsuma. This is a new version of the Cane Creek double barrel, but the Cane Creek double barrel was out for 15 years, never changed. And then after 15 years, really easy to get it serviced because like every suspension tune in the world's seen one by then and has fixed one, tuned one. Might have the spare parts in stock. And they know, they get a good idea, they've used the products, they've worked with multiple customers who have used the products as well. Buying a brand new stuff, it's just playing guessing games, especially because there's no brand that will release like any real world spring curves or damping curves. No brand does that. So this, you have no idea if this fork has 2 times more damping force than the previous one at a certain amount of clicks, or 2 times more. You're just playing guessing games. Unless you know a suspension tuner with a dyno. I sent this to Germany to go into a dyno, and the guy couldn't even fit it into his dyno because of the flight attendant modules were in the way of his dyno. That was a big waste of time and money. A few more questions. Ahmet, any pivots loosening? No, none of them came loose. But the one funny thing, it comes with a torque wrench in the toolbox, which is great. The YT branded torque wrench, great little tool. Only goes up to 10 Newton meters. Every bolt, every frame bolt, I'm pretty sure every single one is 12 or more Newton meters, so you can't perfectly use the torque wrench. John, do you think the extra progression the Capra has helps with overcoming the seal friction on the air shocks? I have a Hightower V2 with a Tractive Tune Super Deluxe, and it tracks unbelievably well for air. Yeah, well yeah, that's one of the ideas of a progressive bike. You get higher leverage at the start of the travel, so it starts to move more easily. You have less leverage at the end, so it's harder to move. So yeah, it should overcome the seal friction, but the seal friction is still there. And always going to be more on an air shock than a coil. I'll just bring this bike back again. Well, this one, okay, I can just get it moving with my bad arm. This one, this bike sags under its own weight because it's got a coil spring, 0 friction on a coil spring. Yeah, you can move it just by touching even little finger. So yeah, the leverage ratio will help to overcome the seal friction, but you always have the seal friction there. And the seal friction is working every time you start to compress and every time you start to extend. On small bumps, you get a lot. It's always sticking one way or another. And you've got multiple seals in there. Then if you've got any side load or fork flex, that can really increase it as well. So yeah, a coil spring in any setup is going to be, this is a super linear bike and it's really sensitive. In theory, this should be more sensitive at the start of the travel, but it just isn't. Yeah, a coil spring, can't argue. It's going to work better. It's going to be more efficient than an air spring any time of the day. More efficient, better mid-stroke support every time, and yeah, it's just better. Coil springs are the one, front and rear, ideally. Less servicing to do. Yeah, no maintenance. There's no maintenance still on this coil spring. This guy, you have to open it every few dozen rides and do an air can service, all that stuff. Right, last couple of questions. Now I'm going to finish it off. Nearly 1 hour. Will you test an e-bike anytime soon? I did almost order a pole. I can't remember the name. Voima? I'm planning to get a pole e-bike frame soon. Mainly because it's long travel, which is good, and it should match the same suspension, shock and parts that I've got on the two steel bikes, so easy to swap over. And they sell a frame kit, which is rare. So yeah, pole e-bike frame coming soon. I've also been looking at an add-on motor for the steel bike, which is really interesting. New bit of kit from Bikey Bike or Lightest.bike. So yeah, hopefully we'll get an e-bike soon. I'd love an e-bike. Oh my God, people keep asking questions. You're asking too many. Too fast. Do you reckon e-suspension has any wider implementation in the future based on this bike? Or manual adjustments will always be more accurate for individual riders? Yeah, well, I think the main problem, or the main thing with the electronic suspension, if you want to try and gain some kind of advantage from it for racing and like chasing after split seconds on climbs or sprints, there's a benefit. I think overall, it's better to ride a bike where the suspension's always the same, because this thing does work well, but it does confuse you slightly when it's always in different settings. Like if you've ever had a bike, was it the Fox CTD, when they had the climb, trail and descend? Front and rear, you could change manual levers to have different settings, and if you ride it in the trail mode for 10 minutes and then change to the descend mode, wow, what's the bike doing? Completely different feel. I think overall, you just want a good setup, the right sag, enough compression for your weight and speed, and that's it. You don't need fancy stuff. Yeah, if you're a World Cup cross-country racer, that could help you out-sprint someone over the finish line at a race. Or World Cup downhill racer, if there's a fire road sprint in the middle of the track, a lockout could give you like that split second. But for the average rider, you just want a good setup. Easy, keep it simple. Cold Will, what's your overall impression of the new enduro geometry? The Kappa is pretty representative of the modern idiom. Where do you think they will go from here, as opposed to where you would like them to go? I think where I would like them to go is the same way as they're going to go. Yeah, this is pretty average enduro geometry for 2022, 2023. 64 head angle, I don't know off the top of my head, 78 seat angle, 445 chainstay, an extra large is 505 reach, I think. I think the reaches aren't going to get any bigger. I think like, I used to go on a lot about longer bikes. That's because there weren't long enough bikes for taller people, because all the sizes used to be really small. So for smaller people, there's the correct size there for them, but they didn't extend big enough. You can sort of prove this by old XC and road bikes. The frame size will get bigger, the stack will get higher, reach longer, and they would come with a longer stem, or even like lay back seat posts to make the bike bigger. But then with mountain bikes, you want a short stem regardless of your height, for handling, not for fit, like on a road bike. But they sort of kept the gradation between each frame size the same, and stopped using the stem length and possible seat post adjustments to make the frame bigger. So the frames weren't getting big enough, so we needed longer bikes to get bigger frames for taller people. I'm not that tall, 6 foot, 185. The bikes were just too short. But I think it's just been a slow movement since Geometron, Mondraker, Pole came out with those modern extreme bikes. It's just been a slow process for many reasons, which are too many reasons to go into here. One reason is brands don't want to change their geometry or their bike too much, because they market so heavily, and I've had brands tell me this in the past. They market so heavily, saying this bike's the best thing ever for years. Then they can't just launch a completely new bike and say, oh, this one's the best thing ever, because then it makes their old one look like junk and like they were lying before. So they have to slowly change. And also riders change, and the riding style changes, and even the people designing the bikes, they don't really have, in general, the time to try out all these different things. So they've got a bike like this, and they've got like a 1 year product cycle or two, so they can just do like a slight change, and they don't want to go too far in case they mess it up and lose time or scare off the customers or those things. So I think the geometry is pretty settled now. I think 63 head angle will become standard, with a few people down 62.5, 63, 63.5, but in that window. Seat angles for riders my height is going to stick around 79, 80. It should probably be slacker for smaller riders, because their seat tube's extending less, so it doesn't need to be as steep to keep the seat in the same place. Chainstay is going to get longer, and BBs are definitely going to get higher, because I think all the BBs are too low nowadays. People think you need low BB for cornering, but I think I've proved to myself with this bike, 500mm chainstay and a plus 10mm BB height, never cornered so easily in my life. Thanks for the help, Paul. Love what you're doing. Cheers, John. Hi, Paul. What do you think of the Andriani piston kit? Haven't tried it. Haven't tried any Andriani stuff, actually. But Andriani do seem to know what they're doing, so it's probably a good product. Right, that's it. If you test the Voima, you'll be selling lots of tickets, I think. Hopefully, that's the goal. So that's it. Ask me anything done, 1 hour. Hopefully I didn't ramble on too much. There's still loads of tickets for sale for this bike. I think 400 are sold. So really good odds, £20 a ticket, global shipping included. Like always, it's done about 140 kilometers. Perfect condition. Yeah, shipped anywhere in the world. It is a really good bike, just needs a tune. I'm sure if you wait a year or you live in a different region or you're willing to spend more time shipping the suspension away and waiting, I'm sure you can get something sorted, or even just sell it, buy some standard units from direct from someone like JTech or NSR pre-tuned, and you'll be flying. Yeah, maybe change the brakes, maybe slightly higher front end. Yeah, great bike. And if you like this, please let me know, and I'll try and line up next week some more for the steel and titanium bikes. Possibly next week I might have to go back to the UK for a slight emergency, so I'm a bit struggling at the moment with the content after I bloody fell off this stupid bike second run. And yeah, that's it. Thanks everyone, and yeah, go and buy some tickets.